Hey everybody, today I've got another 10 new board games to talk about and rank. Before I get started on these 10 games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are by far the best online retailer here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get cracking with the games. At number 10, I have Fallout Shelter. Now, this is a game where you're kind of collecting resources and building these new rooms in a bunker. You're racing to build a certain amount of rooms, but every now and then these monsters kind of come and attack you. You've got to go fight them off because they block certain worker placement spots, essentially. I thought the game was a little bit basic for my own personal tastes, and there was a clear imbalance in the quality of the weapons and cards you could build, because they'd all cost the same amount, but some of these weapons were immensely powerful, where you could roll pretty much anything and beat a bad guy, and some of them were not so good. And I just so happened to kind of buy a card at the right time when a really powerful weapon was out there, and it pretty much helped me sail through the rest of the game. So yeah, not quite what I'm looking for. I'm not a fan of Fallout anyway. I'm not a fan. I've just never played the game, so I don't know anything about the IP, and that maybe took away a point or two as well. So yeah, not a fan of this one. That was Fallout Shelter. At number 9, I have Anomia, which is a pretty chaotic kind of word association game as you are drawing cards one player after another with these different kind of categories on them. As soon as there's a matching symbol on two of these cards, then those players have to try and read out the answer to the other player's card as quickly as possible. Now, I actually tend to enjoy games like this, and I did enjoy this one. So kind of, to be transparent, these next bunch of games are pretty much in the same ballpark as to how much I enjoyed them. It's really quick. Again, it is quite chaotic, and it's sometimes hard to distribute who gets the points because you read out the answers at the same time, but it's so silly and so manic that it doesn't really matter, and it's just a nice way to end a game's night for a 5 or 10 minute game. So yeah, simple stuff. You've probably seen games like this before, but it's a good example of what it does. So that is Anomia at number 9. At number 8, I have Codex Naturalis, which is a puzzly little card game as you are building out this display of cards by overlapping them on the corners. But on those corners of each card, you have kind of resources which are used as prerequisites to build other cards, which will give you kind of points, or they'll give you points based on other symbols on display. You have some public objectives to have different things completed, like if every pair of these symbols you'll get X amount of points, or for every orientation of these coloured cards you'll get X amount of points. So it's all stuff we've seen before. It's not a bad example of a game like that, and it certainly has a really strong visual appeal to it. I love the way the cards look in this game, and it comes in a nice little compact tin. But I did feel like within a matter of a few turns it was very easy to get all the symbols you needed out there, and then it was kind of a paint by numbers, and there wasn't really that taxing puzzle how to min-max and how to optimize each turn. It just felt pretty simple and pretty much on the rails, and it was kind of over before you began. So it wasn't bad, but it didn't inspire me either. And if I wanted a game like this, I'll probably lean towards something like Nova Luna. At number 7, I have Beer and Bread, which was a pretty popular game from last year. Now, this is the first of, I think, 3 two-player only games on this particular video, and this is kind of like a resource management and multi-use card game, as you are playing these cards to gain resources, and then you're also using those cards to complete contracts in 2 different categories, beer and bread, and only the lowest score in each of those categories will be your final score. But you can also use those cards to tuck them under your player board and get ongoing engine benefits. So I thought the actual use of the multi-use cards was quite clever and well implemented. There's also some other really clever little design choices here, where if you gain too many resources and not having the capacity to store them, those resources will go to your opponent and they can use them against you or to complete their own contracts. And it also had this relatively interesting phase structure, where some rounds will be quite fruitful and you get loads of resources available, and some will be a lot more restrictive and not have too many resources available in the pool. And it meant that you could kind of pick up cards that you previously played and then use them again to complete contracts. Check out my review of this one. If I've not uploaded it yet, I will be uploading it soon. It was a solid game, and I can certainly see why people would like it. And I don't really have too much negative to say about it. It just didn't really it didn't really inspire me, and it didn't really kind of give me that urge to come back and explore it much further. It was quite pedestrian, but a good example of what it does, if that makes sense. So nothing wrong with it, but nothing truly great about it either. So that is Beer and Bread. At number 6, I have Caverna. So I've been wanting to play Caverna for many years and finally had a chance to do so. And you know what? I was left pretty impressed by this one. It's certainly a well-designed game. Loads of things you can do by increasing your farm, getting animals, breeding those animals, increasing your own personal caves, give you special rooms and things. Good urgency to get to the worker placement spots that you want. I actually really like the way that new worker placement spots were drip-fed throughout the game, so it's not so overwhelming and not so front-loaded, if that makes sense. Yeah, actually, I thought this game was really well done. If you like worker placement games, I think this is a really good option to go for because it has so many things going on, but it's still relatively digestible. I was pleasantly surprised with how restrictive it was. I was kind of worried that the feeding your workers was going to be paralysing. I think it was just about on the money for me. It's still difficult to feed them, but it didn't occupy your whole strategy and you wasn't always hamstrung by collecting resources just so you don't lose points. But yeah, I think this is probably maybe my favourite big box Uwe Rosenberg game now, maybe matching with Newsford. But yeah, I can certainly see why this is a lot of people's favourite game. These kind of worker placement resource management games aren't my forte. I don't always lean towards them first, but I would play this one again because it is a strong example of its genre. So that is Caverna at number 6. At number 5, I have Lofiton. So Lofiton is another 2-player only game, and essentially this is a kind of a tug-of-war style game as you're competing over these different scoring cards by collecting these good tiles. Generally speaking, if you have the majority of those good, or a certain type of good tiles, you'll score the most amount of points, but they do all kind of score in slightly different ways. But the key concept of this game is how you collect those tiles in the first place, because you're going to have a small hand of cards, only 3 cards. They have to stay in a fixed order in your hand. So you have the left card, the right card, and the middle card. The left card is going to rotate this kind of fleetboard round anti-clockwise. The right one will do the same but clockwise, and the middle card will load in a new contract for you to collect the matching type of tile. And it's all about how to min-max those card plays, to not waste any movement, and to beat your opponent to the punch to get the tiles you want and hopefully win that particular category. It's actually pretty clever. I do kind of feel it's a one-trick pony. I'm not quite sure or sold on the longevity of this one, but that central kind of fleetboard gimmick did hook me at least for a while, and I would recommend you cast your eye over it if that unique mechanism appeals to you. And there are different ways you can play the game. There are kind of very basic modules or advanced modules. I would encourage you to go straight in to those more advanced modules because they just take it a notch above being basic. So it keeps it a little bit more interesting and makes the game feel a little bit more dynamic and adds a wrinkle or two when it comes to decision making. But yeah, maybe a near miss for me. I'm not quite sure if it will stick around much longer, but still, it's nice to see a 2-player game that feels different to other stuff out there. At number 4, I have Hanamikoji Geishas Rose. So I've been eagerly anticipating getting this game to the table after being such a huge fan of the original Hanamikoji for many, many years. It's been one of my favourite 2-player games, and to be honest, one of my favourite games ever. This one shares a lot of similarities to the original in terms of that core action selection system and the I split you choose dynamic. But this one does add a few more things into the mix in terms of this almost like a rondelle of these geishas that go around and round. It allows you to collect these point scoring tiles, also allows you to increase the yield of points you get from these geishas. But to be completely honest, I don't think this game did anything better than the original does. So I have recorded a review of this one, and I suppose the takeaway point of that review was that I feel that if the original game didn't exist, this one would be fantastic and I would definitely have it in my collection. Because of the original one existing, I don't feel this game even has a space or a niche to explore or a niche to take up on my shelf, because everything this game does, the original game does better. It's quicker, it has a smaller footprint, easy to pack away, easier to set up, and just less fiddly. So yeah, ultimately the decision space was roughly the same, but it just had too much stuff bolted on. So yeah, despite me really liking this one in isolation, I cannot advocate it over the original. And it's a weird game to review because this is my 4th favourite game out of all these 10, and I still can't recommend it because of that reason. So that is Hanamikoji Geishas Rose. At number 3, I have Royal Realms. So this game I'm sure you guys wouldn't have heard of because it was sent to me directly by the designer, but this is a kind of a bidding and set collection card game that reminds me a lot of Rainer Knizia's High Society. So in this game you have a predetermined set of cards which are your bidding cards. You're going to use those cards to acquire these gem cards which will score you based on different patterns you build. So if you have a bunch of the same colour in a run, you'll get points. If you have a bunch of the same number but in different suits, you'll get points, and so on. And I love the way that you can use cards to score on multiple different patterns. So you can actually build a bit of a network and utilise certain cards in multiple ways. This game also has some cool twists to it where if you spent the least money by the end of the game, you'll get bonus points. And you can also stash cards away, and whoever's bid the most cards in terms of stashing them away will get these wild cards, which can obviously help you score loads of points by putting them in the right locations. So it's kind of like a recipe of games that I tend to like. You know, I love my little succinct card games that are well balanced and mathematical, and I like bidding, I like set collection. So it's a really nice little package here. And yeah, I'm quite looking forward to getting my review out and playing it at different player counts, because it's a really solid one that I think is going to fly under the radar simply because it's not put out there by a big publisher. But check this one out. That is Royal Realms. Okay, so let's get into the top 2 games now, and this is where my commendations are going to begin. So at number 2, I have Mosaic. So Mosaic is a very streamlined civilization game that's card driven. You're collecting cards in different categories, getting new technologies, increasing your ability to produce resources, and then you're buying more and more cards, building your engine, and basically racing to achieve objectives. Very smooth game. You know, I'm really impressed how this game has no fiddliness, it has no convolution, it has no rounds, no phases. It's always just go, go, go with rapid, snappy decisions, which keeps everybody engaged. Everything's been abstracted here, but not abstracted to the point where you become disengaged with the game. And it just struck that perfect chord for me in terms of what I was looking for a civilization game. Now, I have had to almost house rule a few things here because of the variation in terms of how long the game can take, due to you have to basically shuffle these cards into these decks, and that will be kind of the end game trigger. And what I've done is I've made sure that those cards are shuffled higher up in those decks to make sure the game's a bit quicker, because, you know, the first game we played this one, we went through so many cards, it felt like we were just waiting for the game to end because we had achieved so much. Whereas in the future games, we put those cards much higher in the decks, which added a lot more tension and added that kind of haste to want to get things done quicker, because the game could end at any time. But yeah, really enjoyable game, and yeah, I was left very impressed by this one, and it would certainly break into my top 10 of 2022, and retrospectively, I'll probably do a future list of my kind of final definitive top 10 games of 2022, and no doubt you will be seeing Mosaic on that list. So that is Mosaic at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Craftwagon by Matthias Kramer. So this is a game by Kramer that's certainly not talked about anymore, and it uses that time track system that was made so famous by Matthias Kramer in the legendary Glenmore 2 Chronicles, where you can go as far as you want and get the action you want, but you have to wait for other people to catch up with you before you get another turn. Now, despite this game using that same mechanism, the game itself is completely different, as you are building kind of better engines, you're building these new cars, and you're putting them up for market to sell them to customers which have been determined by the players. And these customers have different wants and needs. Some of them might say, well, I want the car with the best engine. Some might say, I want the most luxurious car, or I want the cheapest car. And it's all about trying to get things on those limited spaces to make sure you are selling your cars to get money. You're also racing your personal car around this track to get more points. So you've got a different frontal fight going here to try and win the game. But it's just a very nice, pleasant game to play that's got interesting decisions, very easy to learn. It kind of fits that nice niche between a mid-weight Euro and a more gateway level game. So yeah, very impressed with this one. I'm really looking forward to playing more of it. The two-player version of the game isn't very good. I would say you're going to need at least 3 players to play this one. But if you have that, a 3 or 4 player count, the market becomes very dynamic, and it's just an extremely fun game to play. So that is Craftwagon at number 1. So there we have it, that concludes the video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and you've learned a thing or two about these games. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.